Good evening. It is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019 at 7 o'clock p.m. I'd like to call to order the Town of Sutton Board of Selectmen's meeting. And if we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First on the agenda is public forum. Public forum is limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. And if you guys would like to come up for a public forum, if it's okay with the board, we have a little presentation tonight, and it may take a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but I think for this purpose, that'd be all right.
Perfectly
But
fine.
come on up.
Step in the big chairs.
We switched out to comfortable ones this year.
No school chairs.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves.
I'm Willem Edwards.
I'm Catherine Fields.
Great, and tell us why you're here.
I am last year's Project 351 ambassador, and this is this year's Project 351 ambassador. And at the Dudley Genrin on 9/11 at 6 p.m., we are hosting a tribute service for first responders, veterans, military, victims of 9/11, and their families. And we would like to invite the town and you guys, and also if anyone would like to, any of you would like to speak, we would like to know, and that would be great.
Okay. Can you tell us, I know you did this last year,
Yes,
and was that the first year?
yes.
It's
Can
a
you-
nice ceremony.
It was a really nice ceremony.
Thank you.
But for the public, can you tell us a little bit about what the agenda was like, what happened?
So last year we started with opening remarks, and then we did the Pledge of Allegiance. Then I had speakers such as Ryan Fatman and then
John Hebert.
John Hebert.
John
yeah.
Hebert.
Yeah, chairman of the
Um,
board last year.
And then I had a personal connection that I liked to share. And then my friend played the taps. And then afterward we had subs and the ladies auxiliary baked cookies, and we ate and talked.
That's right, the food was good. This is a little bit out of protocol, but if anybody has questions or comments, I think that would be fine in this case.
Are you planning on following basically the same agenda this year? Are you gonna add new things, or?
We're planning on following the same agenda, but we have invited more speakers. Joe McKenna, the police is working on getting someone to speak, and so is the fire department.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
Anybody else?
I was just curious, Katie, what is your perspective of the whole ceremony? What are you most looking forward to?
I am excited to just hear how what everybody has to say, how everybody has an outlook on what happened on September 11th, and how everybody feels about it, and to just join together and remember and honor those who served and helped.
That's lovely.
Terrific.
I'd just like to thank you guys for doing this. It's really important that we remember and continue to keep that in our consciousness, and the fact that two of you probably were you even born then?
No.
You know, and for you to be carrying this on is pretty amazing. So I just thank you.
That was my question also, if you had been born then, and what it's like to, I grew up, the Vietnam War was going on, and that was like part of just everyday life, and I don't know if that's what 9/11 is with you guys too. It's just part of American life these days.
Part of the history. It's funny you guys mentioned that, because I had exactly the same thought, was that, for most of us, we all know exactly where we were on 9/11 when we heard that news. And you guys are carrying on this kind of commemorative thing when you don't have that experience. You weren't even alive for it. So people say kids today, well, these are kids today, so we appreciate that. Thank you. Now, I myself will not be in town on that day, so I'll have to miss it, but I think we have a couple of people here that would be willing to speak if necessary, so I'm sure they'll work out amongst themselves who will be speaking. I think you only want one of us, right?
We'll have a presence there. either
Yeah.
way.
But I certainly encourage everybody here and everybody around town to, is this open to the public? I
Yes.
shouldn't invite
Yes, it
people
is.
that
Yes.
you don't invite, but,
Open to it.
but it was really a terrific event last year, and I'm sure it will be this year. And again, we really appreciate the effort that you're putting into getting this done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add? Great. Thank you very much.
And you were inside 5 minutes. You did perfectly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
See you on Wednesday.
Anybody else here for public forum? Okay. So next on the agenda is our minutes from the August 20th meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from our meeting on August 20th, 2019.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is deed acceptance for Hunter's Court and Partridge Hill Road and related easements. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, that Maytown meeting, residents voted to authorize the Board of Selectmen to take title to both Partridge Hill and Hunter's Court. Both of those streets have been signed off by the building commissioner and the planning board. We're required to take ownership within 120 days of town meeting, which was May, 13th, give or take. So we're running up against that clock a little bit, and this is sort of a pro forma vote, but the board needs to vote to take ownership of these lots, and the town will maintain these properties, and they count towards our Chapter 90 streets and so forth.
Anything you want to add, Jen?
Yeah.
All right, then. Questions, Jesse?
No, I don't really have any questions. I think when it came up before us last time,
Yep.
we had a very lengthy conversation about it, and all my questions were answered at that point, so I'm good.
Terrific. Wendy?
I am satisfied, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Well said, thank you.
All
Jeff?
set, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Sounds easy. Then I will accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the deeds for Partridge Hill Road and Hunter's Court and related easements pursuant to May 13th, 2019 town meeting vote.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Also passes 5-0. The real reason Jen is here is because our next item is review and approve the housing study and production plan. I don't know, Jim, you want to start? Or?
No, I can turn it over to Jen real quickly, but this has been a process that's been ongoing for over a year now. A committee was put together, working in partnership with CMRPC, to look at the needs, housing needs in the town of Sutton. They did a terrific job sending out questionnaires and having various meetings, and tonight they're here, or Jen's here to present this report, hopefully for approval by the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, if you'd like to make some comments.
All right, so we did have the presentation of the actual plan a little while ago. And so tonight I'm here to request your adoption of the recommendations in the plan. And that would be really an indication that the board believes the recommendations should be pursued for consideration by Sutton residents. It's not an outright endorsement of the recommendation. It's really just, these are worthy recommendations. These are things that were brought up in the process through one means or another that we should have a public discourse about and pursue, and let Sutton residents decide where they fall on these issues. So that's really what a vote to adopt the recommendation will mean. I want to just back up a few steps and just go over just briefly kind of how we got here. So everything that I do, or most things I do, and that the planning board does, really kind of fall out of the master plan. So the 2012 master plan, like all master plans, had a housing section, and it contained 6 goals with respect to housing. That included completing a housing production plan, which is what this is, Identifying local initiatives to increase affordable housing and housing diversity, considering adopting an inclusionary housing bylaw, evaluating the effectiveness of the existing accessory apartment bylaw and revising that as needed with the goal of having that be a way to increase housing diversity, and really developing outreach and sharing information about different styles of housing like multifamily and affordable housing and kind of what that is and what that's not. And then kind of looking at review standards and for types of housing we have in town with the goal towards kind of one of the overall reaching goals, which is really kind of maintaining the feel that Sutton has. So realizing you can have different forms of housing, but if you maintain a certain standard in terms of design and density and those kind of things, you can really do a lot towards maintaining a feeling. So if you'll recall from the master plan, there was a similar survey, I shouldn't say similar, but a survey like there was for the housing production plan, and 53% of people who responded to the survey said that completing a housing production plan was an important goal. Okay? 22 said, that's not important. 25% said, I don't know, probably don't know what it is. So, but 53% of people said it's important that we complete this plan and that we get this done. And 47.6% of respondents said we need to encourage the development of housing that meets the varied needs of our residents. So where 32% disagreed with that, 19% were unsure, almost 50% said, yeah, we really need to think about that, developing housing that is responsive to a diversity of needs. So those were some of the highlights of that section of the master plan. So we continued, we had an opportunity to get a grant to work on the housing production study and production plan. We got that grant and we worked with Central Mass Regional Planning, as Jim indicated. Notices of the survey of the meetings went out to every single household in every single P.O. box in this town, really trying to draw people into the process. There were different sessions during the day and at night in different locations, and we got a lot of feedback and commentary as we did that study. What we heard loud and clear in the study was the importance of people remaining in the community as they age. More than 59% of respondents considered this very important or extremely important. And yet we got a plethora of comments like, my current house is too big to maintain. I need to downsize and affordability is a concern. I'm helping to downsize to housing suited for the elderly. I will have to move from the farm at some point. Can't have a house that's too large, but I really want to stay in Sutton if I can. These are comments, the kind of comments we heard again and again in these responses. One of the questions said, is housing affordability an issue for you or anyone you know who lives in this town? While 42% said no, 44% of the people who took this survey said, yeah, it's a problem for me or somebody I know who lives in this town. So we consider this a really important endeavor. And it's an important endeavor for a lot of reasons. One of the kind of mechanical reasons why it's important is because of 40B, which is, as you know, the comprehensive permit law, which was adopted in 1969 in Massachusetts as an offshoot of the Federal Fair Housing Act that was adopted in 1968. And a key part of that law was that all of the communities in the Commonwealth should share in the responsibility of making sure there is a diverse and affordable supply of housing across the Commonwealth by ensuring at least 10% of their housing stock is affordable in terms of HUD standards. So I did have another informational session on this last Thursday where we went to the steps of hopefully clearly defining what affordable housing is in HUD standards, and that's kind of taking the median income, which is over $97,000 right now in our area, and those making 80% or less of that qualify for affordable housing. And you basically, and if and you're not supposed to spend any more than 30% of your monthly income on housing expenses to be living in an affordable house. So when you do the math backwards on that, that relates to, for a 3-bedroom home, in the range of $205,000 roughly, and for a 1-bedroom apartment, about $14,000 a month. So if you know mortgage numbers, yes, $1,400. $14,000, yeah, no, $1,400 a month. When you look at mortgage taxes on a house, that's almost the same number, that $1,400 a month, whether you have that mortgage or you have rent. That rent number seems extremely extreme to me, but so you're talking affordable housing. Really, you have to have a decent job, or 2 decent jobs in your household to be able to get into affordable housing and to be able to maintain that. There are certainly other forms of affordable housing. You can target very low income or extremely low income income groups with Section 8 vouchers or things like that. That is really not what we're targeting in terms of our demographic, in terms of what we have for transportation services and the like. Our community is not suited to those very low or very low income brackets and the needs of that particular income population. So what we're talking about in terms of encouraging affordable housing is that low income group who still needs to make 60-something thousand, for a 2-person household, 81,000 if you've got 3 kids running around. So these are not crazy low numbers. So I just want to be very clear on that. There are lots of levels of affordability because of who we are here and what we have for services. It is not appropriate for us to target very low or extremely low income housing here. It's not. So what we're focusing on is the low income. So what we found in all of the studies and all of the demographics that we did, the actual facts that are out there in terms of who lives here and ages and aging, and in terms of income levels, is that a higher percentage than we figured. Almost 25% of our residents are cost burdened or extremely cost burdened right now. They're paying more than 30% and many paying more than 50% of their monthly income on housing costs. And while some of that, of course, can be attributed to just bad decisions at some point, what we're finding as we drill down and look at the actual detailed studies is that by and large, a lot of that is coming from 2 sources. So elderly people or people moving into retirement or in retirement who are on a fixed income, but their taxes are increasing, their healthcare costs are increasing, their medical needs are increasing, they're having to hire people to help them care for homes, those kind of things. So that's where we're seeing one of the biggest expanding demographics on cost burden. And the second one is unexpected life events. People who lose a job, their company closes, they have a medical condition that they never expected, those kind of things. So that's where we're seeing most of the cost burden come from, as opposed to, I just bought something I really couldn't afford. Or I just made a bad financial decision. So, looking at our demographics, looking at our needs under 40B, as you know, if you are not at 10% per the 40B regulation, you have some vulnerability to what's called an unfriendly 40B. So 40Bs can override all local zoning. You can do whatever density you want, housing types, architecture, all of those kind of things. And if you are not at 10% or working towards it, then you have some vulnerability that a company can come in and just kind of propose whatever they want. And by and large, as long as it's not super crazy, you will have no choice. So that's kind of the other side of things, working towards 40B compliance so that we can try to control our own destiny in terms of what is more suitable for us in terms of density, housing style, housing types, as opposed to having it kind of thrust on us. There is plenty of acreage available in areas with water and sewer. There's been recent developments with Wilkes Water that they now tell us they have over 100,000 gallons of water currently available. There's plenty of sewer capacity, and there's plenty of people looking around to do higher density housing, because there's a huge demand for apartments, for higher density housing in general. So this is not a pie in the sky. So we're trying to meet our 40B requirements, and we're trying to meet the needs of our community. It's kind of two-pronged. So the goals that you see, the recommendations of this report, try to reach out and touch those kind of aspects. Let's see how we can do with 40B compliance, so we're less exposed to something we might not otherwise want. And let's see how we can meet the needs of the people who live in this community or may want to move into this community in terms of seniors aging and young professionals who may want to stay and have grown up here, want to stay here, or who want to move here to encourage the development of businesses here or in this area. So you'll see a bunch of recommendations. They fall into 3 categories: capacity building, zoning strategies, and housing development strategies. I won't go through all of them unless you want me to, but they range from things like, again, considering the Community Preservation Act. And the reason you would do that is because you gather money from taxes, as a surcharge on taxes, and from a match from the state, a percentage match, not 100% match. And you can apply that to creation of affordable housing, kind of with you in the driver's seat. You can apply it to historic preservation and open space preservation. Again, this is not you saying, I think that's a good idea. This is you saying, you know what, let's get all the facts on that again. Let's run the numbers. What could we really earn on that every year? What would the real impact be on an average household, or even a high-end household, a medium household, and a low-income household? What would the state really give us? Understand the numbers and make a decision on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Things like exploring inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is things like, so you're in the village district or in an office light industrial district and you're putting in a little retail complex, or in the business district. Is there room for, or is it appropriate to require maybe some second floor apartment units or accessory housing in with that project? And if not, maybe there should be a payment into a housing trust fund, which is a fund that's set aside to help the town, again, promote and or develop affordable housing within the town in the driver's seat. And then you have things like adjusting the bylaws, considering a cottage housing bylaw. Cottage housing is 1 bedroom generally with a loft. It is targeted to the downsizing senior, the retired person. It can be anybody, but usually the people that are really looking for cottage housing are downsizing seniors and young professionals. It could be me, or my mom not living with me. So it's a housing type that has relatively low impact in terms of school resources and the like, while trying to target directly what you see in the demographics. The increasing young professional age demographic we're seeing, and the age demographic of everything from 60 years old and up in this town skyrocketing at a much faster rate than any other town in the area, Worcester County and the Commonwealth. And things like, thinking about whether we have surplus parcels of town land that aren't dedicated for open space or a specific purpose. And, should we look at developing a specific form of affordable or senior affordable or family or whatever you think is appropriate housing on those parcels, so that we are 100% in control of design, density, and the like. So we're not reacting, we're being proactive. So these are some of the potential recommendations. I'm happy to go over all of them if you would like to, or any other ones I haven't mentioned. But again, this comes down from the master plan as a recommendation. We got a grant to do the work, produce the plan with as inclusive a process as we could come up with, and recommendations rolled out of it to really address affordable housing from 2 aspects: meeting our 40B requirements so we have less exposure, and also meeting the needs of our demographics and what the gap is between in the demographics. So, I hope I covered things as comprehensively as possible, but I am happy to take any questions.
You probably don't have any, Jesse, but if you do.
No, I don't. I have comments. I actually don't have questions. Believe it or not, I actually have something to say. All right, first and foremost, Jen, excellent presentation as always, and I'd like to personally thank you for all the work that you do. I know that you definitely do yeoman's work, and you're constantly trying to look out for the best interests of our community. So thank you very much. And I apologize for missing Thursday. Unfortunately, I was kind of doing other town business that night, but we can talk about that off camera. But anyways, I do have a couple of comments. First and foremost, I read something the other day, and I wish for the life of me I could remember which magazine I read it in, but it was a detailed survey that basically stressed, more important than anything else, that Massachusetts has the most expensive housing in the entire country. Not that housing units themselves individually are most expensive, but it's the combination of what you touched upon. Housing prices plus property taxes, and they are crushing people, particularly those on fixed incomes. So that is definitely a concern. Second, I do have a concern with Beacon Hill. I'm not trying to sound paranoid. I just don't trust them. They're looking out for Boston's interests. They're not looking out for the interests of the municipalities. So I am very hesitant to support things and new ideas that come out of Beacon Hill. That is for sure. And I think I'm not alone in that, because I know over the years the residents in this town have approved stronger bylaws than has been suggested from Beacon Hill and the think tanks that serve the interests of Boston. And I think back to the Wally Johnsons and the Mike Chizzies, you know, that like you were concerned with protecting the interests of not just some of the residents, but all the residents. I'm also concerned that any such developments, and again, you alluded to, are going to end up in areas where there are resources available. Wilkes and Manchog, that has sewerage and water. But as residents who live in those parts of towns can tell you, we're already pretty dense in population. And in fact, I think back to the last town election when I went to vote, and the person who was overseeing our precinct, he pulled me aside and he goes like, will you stop dumping things in Wilkes? And it's like, I understand. But again, as I said, first and foremost, I'm concerned with those who are most vulnerable, our seniors. You and Wally Baker came in and gave us a presentation about the simple reality is that we are an aging community. And I think it behooves us to contemplate strategies to help those who have paid for the schools and the teachers and the police, not just for years, but for decades. We owe it to them to figure out ways to help them stay in town. So I am not going to endorse anything particular in here, but I am going to endorse approving this and put it forward to the residents so we can continue this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick comments and questions. When you were here with Wally and we were talking about so many members of our community aging out and we touched on 40B, it's my recollection that I had asked about if the new senior complex came into town, if that would help us with 40B, and my recollection was that it would not. But if this was approved, would it then help us with our 40B status?
We actually have a proposed bylaw on this year's warrant. The only reason it would not is because if your, in this case, continued care retirement bylaw, your over 55 bylaw, contains the words excluding specifically people under the age of 18 from a housing development, you are disqualified from counting any of those units. We have a bylaw proposed this year, again, having run the numbers and done the homework on other two-bedroom condominium projects in town, similar projects in town, and now having a comfort level with how many children those actually produce, or I will say don't produce. We are proposing that that one sentence be stricken from our CCRC bylaw. As soon as we strike that, any units that are created will count on our subsidized housing inventory. And like I said, we're comfortable doing that because, for one thing, they're still gonna market it as an over 55. And those condominium developments we have in town and have had in town for years, the villas, Woodburyville Heights and Forest Edge, they're all 2-bedroom, and these will be 1 and 2 bedrooms max. and they are just not producing children. The Villas literally has not one person under the age of 18 in permanent residence right now. The Woodburyville Heights has 4 under the age of 18 in over 80 units, and Forest Edge has its all-time high of 13, all-time high. They usually average 7 to 9. So we have the demographics, we have the statistics in Sutton, that we just, our 2-bedroom developments of varying different income types, as you know, all 3 of those are different price points. They just don't produce the kids, they're not conducive to that. So, and all CCRCs are 2-bedroom max. So, so we'll be pulling that sentence, and then we'll be able to count those units. So that will help us to some degree, but again, you're talking a development with 3 price points, and even their lowest price point is higher than a cottage housing price point would be. So you're offering varying levels. You're offering HUD affordable, which is kind of that set 205, and 3 price points that kind of help a little bit, because at least they're not all coming in around 400,000, so that's good. But you're still not hitting the affordability, the market affordability demographic that is vacant in the town. And the fact that, I don't think it's 100% accurate, but when I ran the numbers for single family 1-bedroom units, there are 0% in the town of Sutton. And yet we're seeing again and again, and Michelle is hearing at the senior center, and where's the 1-bedroom? Where's the, you know, I just want a master bedroom on the first floor, and that's it. I just, you know, and so we don't have that demographic at all. So the cottage housing would definitely meet a different demographic. And just for a second, we're looking at right now allowing cottage housing in R1, because as you pointed out, R2 is, and Village, that's Wilkes and that's Manchog. It's 2.1% of the town, and there's almost nothing left, and you're already high density. So we're looking at cottage housing for R1 as well. And before everybody freaks out, it's 4 to 12 units max, and you would have to meet Title V. So if it's not an area where the soil is appropriate, you can't go there. You have to meet Title V. And when you do the math with a 5-acre minimum, you're talking lot sizes that are comparable, slightly less if you have 12 units, but comparable and greater if you're on the lower 4 to 6 unit side than what is required in our villages. So higher density, but increased open space standards, significant design standards. So the intent is to increase the diversity of housing, but work on what is so important and is said again and again by residents, that Sutton has a feel, it has a look, and that is so much a part of what people bought into in this town and desire in this town. So if you live in a street where there's a lot of 2-acre house lots with 4-bedroom colonials on it, and you have a cottage, you know, neighborhood in your neighborhood, you want it to be attractive. You don't want it to detract from what's around you. And as was mentioned at the meeting the other night, everything's market driven. The market is coming down on the 4-bedroom colonials, on the 2-acre plus lots. The market is clamoring for the small yard, single family homes with 2 and 3 bedrooms, and the small 1-bedroom units. So it's clamoring for that, but there's a cap. You're not gonna have 20 cottage developments in town, you're just not. So, and there's a learning curve with developers. So we'll be having a robust discussion starting on Tuesday night in the planning board public hearing, whether is 5 acres the right number, and I'll have maps that show what that exposure is. Because it's not 5 acres, 5 acres and 250 feet of frontage, so you can't have the 30 feet of frontage in the 5-acre lot. So to show where things could, on current lot, where those could be, is it 5, is it 7, is it 10? Is it 4 to 12 units, or really is it only 4 to 8 units? Let's have that discussion, and I also have an architect actually taking the bylaw and drawing for us. If I'm the architect on this project and I just read your bylaw, this is what this looks like on the ground. This is what your bylaw comes out to in design, so we can see, which we often don't get to see, if the words produce what we intend. So, and he will recommend any changes or additions to catch the vision. And we've sent him, as you might have seen in that presentation, the vision of the cottages we're talking about that are so Sutton-esque and so in keeping with the quality and the wonderful setting we already have in this town, and not wanting to ruin that in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of the synopsis on the housing, but we can talk more about that.
So just a couple of quick things. Part of the reason that I'm endorsing looking into this more is we aren't only aging out of the community, we're pricing out of the community. So the accessory apartments, the cottages, yeah, you know, I'd like to see my son be able to purchase a home here someday, or other young families with young children, and it's simply not going to happen, you know, with our current housing situation. And I've spoken with colleagues in other communities that are strikingly similar to Sutton in many ways, and the CPA has been so critical to what they've been able to do in some of those communities, and no one wants a tax surcharge. I understand that. But there is some matching from the state, and I just think what we're preserving and what we're working toward far outweighs that 1% to 3%. So I endorse more information, certainly. And I appreciate your presentation very much.
There's never a downside to looking at the facts and making an informed decision. There just isn't.
Agreed. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jen. You know, I've been kind of thinking about this a lot because this is kind of a complex issue, and really been doing a lot of research, particularly around the economics of it. So I actually got to use my economics degree for the first time. And really sitting back and really sitting to think about, like, what is the economics of this, right? And so, you know, as a region, we're one of the most expensive regions in the country. And I think what the state is achieving to do is to create, you know, to figure out a way to solve for the affordability of the region. But the challenge is there's really only two ways to change affordability. So number one is to build more houses, right? So it's to relax zoning laws and allow more houses to be built. And then the other option is to do what the state has chosen to do, because it's probably in a region of, you know, 300 something towns with different little needs and goals. There's no way we're going to be able to, as a region, change all the zoning to meet kind of the types of zoning you have down south where the housing is cheap. So they come up with a program like 40B. Now, the economics of 40B or any type of programs like that is it actually increases the overall cost of housing. Like, that is a fact that has been proven over and over. But the fact that we don't want to mess with making it easier and cheaper to build houses here, like, it's our only option. So based on that, that's our only option, we have some choices to make. And as a community, you know, the state has put together a program that kind of, you know, requires us to meet a certain, like, goal of 10%. Now, we can choose as a town to say, you know what, we're not going to pay attention to that. We're going to take the risk of, you know, a 40B project coming in, unfriendly 40B project coming in. And, you know, there's probably some good chance that we're not going to see a 40B in a part of town where the soil, you know, the Title V soils can't handle a large project like that. But, you know, it's still like it's seeding our options, and also kind of letting us, you know, and again, it has to work economically anyway. But the bottom line is that we can do nothing, or we can decide to, like, work within the bounds of this and try to figure out what is possible for us and what are the options. And so even kind of taking it down to another level. So there's a couple ways that we can do even, you know, 40B housing, or, you know, and that is to take housing that's market rate and then require the developer, or negotiate with the developer, correct, to do a percentage of, you know, houses that are below market rate. The other option is to build, like, options like cottage housing or things like that actually you can build at the rate that you can sell them at which is affordable. So there's options there as well. But I think what I'm really recommending to residents to do is to look at this in the complexity of this, that this is a state program that we kind of have to live within. We can choose to ignore it, or we can choose to do something about it. But in the end of the day, I'd rather have our own options and to look at all the different things and kind of turn over all the rocks to see how we can try to live within this, but also make sure that Sutton doesn't end up, you know, with the types of housing we don't want here. And I went to, I think it was one of the workshops you had done, where residents looked at all different types of options, what would be palatable to them. And there were some really nice options that people were open to in what parts of town that they'd be comfortable with those in. And I think those are the kind of things we need to continue to do and have those dialogues to see what works and what doesn't work for the town. Because the last thing we want to do is we don't want to lose the kind of spirit of why a lot of us live here. But there's also the human component of this as well. And I think many of us have addressed this. There's the elderly and the rising cost on a fixed income. There's, to your point, I would love my kids to be able to have the option to live here. In fact, I'm worried about them being able to live in this region, never mind here in Sutton. So, and also access to jobs. Like the closest drive I have right now is 40 minutes. That's the closest I've ever had. That's usually an hour to get to decent jobs. So that's another factor that we have to think about as well. So I think what I'm really kind of saying here is I'm trying to put the facts out there so people can understand the economics of this and the reality of it. Because doing nothing is not probably a great option, but it is a choice that we have. But what I think is really important is that we at least continue this forward to figure out what our options are that work for Sutton so that we can stay within the guidelines. And to be honest with you, what I don't want the state to do is to get so desperate, because the cost, especially to your point, it's really expensive in Boston. That's where the real prices are crazy. To get to the point where they start considering as of right building code, building bylaws, where you can just they determine what it will be for Sutton for our development needs. That's what I don't want to happen, and I think that's plausible with the amount of cost. So I think we've got to try to figure out how to work within the bounds of what is, which is we have a 40B, and find what are the best options for us, and that we can kind of live within the bounds of the guidelines that are given us. And I think there's many options. I do like the idea of, I don't really love the idea of taking market rate homes and then bringing them down to a lower price. I think that as a region creates more cost because the developers have to pass to get on. And you actually see in Boston, almost all new developments are luxury developments to offset the low income housing that they're developing. And they're actually developing less low income housing than they really like to meet. So there's a lot of challenges with it. We need to continue to improve it. But when you really step back on it, what we have to do is figure out what are we going to do as a town to offset these challenges and to take into account the human component of this, that through like worker housing and possibilities for our children to live here and possibilities for elderly to stay in town and downsize. And so that's why I just really implore people to keep this moving forward. And I definitely endorse this from the standpoint of looking at our options. There's some that make me nervous. And there's other ones that I think are really great. And I think the other thing to think too is, 40B is more possible. An unfriendly 40B is possible when you have more sewer, and we're talking about expanding sewer, and that puts us more at risk, particularly in areas of town that we really relish. So I wholly endorse the idea of expanding the sewer for the schools, but it does put us more at risk for an unfriendly 40B in a place that we really wouldn't want it. So these are things that we've got to think about as we move forward into this. So I just wanted to I guess I'm not being really summarized in it, but I really want to just think through all of the logic of it and then get that out for people to ponder and make their decisions around. But just ignoring it is not an option. We've got to really think about this and be strategic. And I think that's one thing we've done really well, is that we've controlled growth at a much slower pace than most of the region. And that has been at a cost. It's risen the price. But on the other hand, we also have a town that we really love. So how do we balance those two things? And I think it's always a challenge, but I think it's definitely doable, and we need to do something. We need to at least attempt to do it. So that's my feeling. So thank you for all the work you've done on this.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jen, thank you for all you did with this. It's a lot of work, and it's important. And Jonathan, I agree with you. I think we ignore this at our own peril. I had some questions on the cottage housing, and I shouldn't say I have that, but on the overall plan, and that we make a recommendation that we go forward and recommend this for future consideration, I guess. How does that stop us from an unfriendly 40B?
Good question. So there are a number of ways you can achieve safe harbor under the 40B regulation. The first and the most obvious is have 10% of your housing stock in affordable units. We're at 1.5%. So unless you've got 285 units in your back pocket, that one's off the table. So the next one is having 1.5% or more of the community's total land area in moderate income housing. So again, we need 327 acres in moderate income housing. We don't come close. And the third, and there's 5 here, so the third is having 0.3% of the community's area that's zoned for residential, commercial, and industrial, or 10 acres in 1 calendar year in front of the zoning board in a comprehensive permit. So we'd have to have a minimum 65-acre comprehensive permit process in front of the zoning board under consideration right now to stop another one from coming behind it immediately. Or we can demonstrate, I'm going to skip over the next one and we'll come back to it, or we can have a project in front of the zoning board that is considered a large project, and for a community of our size, that is generously actually defined as 200 or more units in one project. And the 5th way is to be showing recent progress, sorry. So recent progress entails having a housing production plan approved by the Department of Housing and Community Development. Of course, this plan was developed under the DHCD guidelines with our partner CMRPC. So we know what's in here meets all of their guidelines, okay? So, so that's step 1. And the second one is working towards creation of units and trying to produce in a 12-month period between 0.5% and 2% of the units you need. So, for instance, can we get here? I'm not sure we can get here, but this is the first step in trying to get to this safe harbor. So we'd have to produce between 17 and 68 units in a 12-month period. So Armsby Road is starting in the fall. Are they going to produce 17 affordable units in a year? I think with 93 units, we've gotten them negotiated up to 13% instead of 10%. So I don't think there's 17 total in that project. So we would have to get those built out in a year, and we'd have to have a few more somewhere. So it's a high bar, but it's a bar you need to understand the numbers on, and we at least have to have step 1, the housing production plan, to even be able to reach for that bar. And of course, the benefit of having the housing production plan is the thought process and the community dialogue that moves us closer to 10%. If we get to 5%, we can be a community housing choice community. We can apply and be designated as a housing choice community and apply for state funding to actually proactively work on the development of affordable housing. So we can reach out and get some state funding, as we have on any number of different kinds of initiatives, to help us materially work on affordable housing. Hire an engineer to work on a project on town land, pursue one of these bylaws that looks promising, any number of things. So even getting to 5% is a goal you want to reach for, because it opens other financial initiatives for you to kind of help you move towards what you want. So that's why how the plan can help you get there, it's still a high bar for us.
Does approving the plan or recommending
Mhm.
the plan for future consideration, does that
I think
protect us immediately while we're going forward with this, or what's the real impact of us voting on this?
it's step 1 of a 2-part process. If you never do the second step, it isn't an absolute safe harbor. What it would do is, if you have an unfriendly 40B come forward and you are working on some of the recommendations, you get more consideration than if you were doing nothing and just snubbing the whole 40B thing, and just so you get some consideration. When push comes to shove, what you're forced to do and forced to accept is a range. So again, if you're in a community that's at 1.5% and is like, we'll take our risk, have a nice day, you will get less consideration from the Housing Appeals Committee than if you're a community that says, we recognize our duty to work on 40B, and this is what we're doing. We have an approved plan, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing that, and we'd like you, Housing Appeals Committee, to have some consideration for what we're doing and require a density adjustment, require them to work with us more in architecture, so you don't have absolute safe harbor unless you're also producing some units, but you do have, from my discussions with the housing experts and the people at DHCD, you gain immediately additional consideration should you be faced with an unfriendly 40B.
Okay. So I'm not sure how I feel about each of the different strategies here, particularly the Community Preservation Act.
Right.
But I'm in favor of going forward with this to begin the discussion, because I think all of us are subject to aging and all the different life events that happen. And they happen quickly, and to put our head in the sand and say, it's not my issue, I think is a mistake, because I felt for a long time that houses in this country were just not built for living your whole life in. And as you get older, it gets more and more difficult. I had an experience, recently with my father getting, as he had some medical issues and health issues, and all the issues that came with just living in his house. So it is a real issue. So thanks, and I think we should continue this discussion. So.
Thank you. Jen, I think everyone here has done it, but I'm going to do the same thing and just thank you for your efforts on this. And there's a lot here to talk about. So, not only have you educated the community and this board as a group, but I think you work personally with me to help me understand some of these issues, and I think with some of the rest of us, and we certainly appreciate that. This is a difficult issue. There's a lot of strong feelings, I think, on either side of this issue. So, taking it head on is it's not easy. I would like to thank my colleagues, because I don't really have to say much, because we've been through a lot of this stuff at this point. So,
Welcome.
yes.
That's what we're here for.
It's funny, because I've been saying for years that I don't know if my kids could ever afford to live in Sutton, and that's a shame. I'd like for them to live here. And so affordable housing, without really even sort of thinking it in this context, was something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And I didn't believe Jeff until just the last few years, but apparently I am also subject to this aging thing. and so for myself, the house that I've been in, that I've always thought of as the forever house, I'm just not so sure about that anymore. So, these are personal issues for each one of us, for everyone in town. I think Jonathan is referring to it as the human issue, right? That where are people going to live? And you've been talking about demand for this kind of housing. I think that's real, and the idea that we move forward in a thoughtful way rather than having it forced upon us is the right way to go about it. So I think, as everyone else at this table has said, this is really about allowing us the opportunity to continue to discuss these issues. And so from that perspective, I'm with everybody else here, that I support this and appreciate the opportunity for us to be able to get continued education as we move forward. So thank you. Anything else before we take a motion? Then let's do that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the recommendation of the Housing Needs Study and submit the study to the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. One more time. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Jen. All right, we are on to the town manager's update. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first update. Tomorrow we actually get a new treasurer. Lisa Lynch is coming to the town after spending 17 years in the town of Sherborne as the assistant treasurer and assistant collector, both of those roles. But in the meantime, I would like to thank Donna Wood and Erin Chinapi, who pretty much ran that office for the past couple of months. They went above and beyond to make sure things ran smoothly. Obviously with the help of our great accountant, but there was a lot of work, and Donna worked a number of Saturdays overtime, not only doing the sewer clerk's additional billing and accounts receivable and so forth, but also helping clean up the treasurer's area and the boxes and everything else that went into that. So I'd like to thank them. So as we went through this process, we started to think, Tim and I mainly, about what could we do for the future, anticipating, succession planning for the treasurer's office. I kind of train for my own benefit, but also for the department heads. You got to think about who's coming after you, because we want to make sure the town of Sutton is in good hands for the future, not just for the moment. So think about, how you can maintain your office's success with potentially a succession plan. So I've talked about that, and department heads have talked about that as well when they've come up here. But the first idea is take the assistant collector, which Donna Wood is currently in that role, and make it assistant treasurer and collector. And that would require the new treasurer, Lisa Lynch, to train up Donna to understand the assistant treasurer's role and what that implies. Donna is closer to retirement than I am, maybe, but she has a job as long as she continues to work the way she does. But assuming she retires in the next handful of years, we'll need a new person to replace her. And we've got a good payroll clerk, not a payroll clerk, but assistant accountant, sewer clerk in Darlene Tabaj, and she's expressed some interest in moving up as well. So, creating that succession plan where there's a place to go after being a clerk, and additional salary and everything else, it kind of creates that ability to people's interest and desire. They go for training, they get prepared, and so I think it's a good idea. Obviously, Donna's role would increase, and would look to increase her pay just a little bit, but to recognize the additional duties that she performs. Secondly, I would like to take Erin Chinapi's role and increase her to 35 hours. Right now she's 25 here and 10 down at the schools. I talked to Ted, and Ted is interested in working with his current people and increasing their hours, and making Erin's role as payroll clerk / HR specialist. She's pretty much taken over the HR since Lisa Trost has left, working with the IAC, planning those future meetings, talking to our consultants about health insurance costs, dealing with a new enrollment for all healthcare and other benefits in the town. So she's really living up to that role, and I would like to increase that. We will have some transfers at town meeting to cover these additional costs, but I think I would like to get the board's kind of, hopefully support, but at least acknowledgement of these changes. The new sewer accounting clerk, Darlene Tabaj, as I mentioned, started on Monday, August 26th. She's a good fit for that office, and she's a parent of a couple of kids that go to Sutton schools, and she's definitely a welcome addition to the treasurer's office. Triple E, this is probably old news, but aerial spraying took place on Monday, August 26th in the evening. I'm sure everybody heard the planes flying overhead multiple times. It was originally scheduled for the 25th, but canceled due to the weather. Currently, they don't have a plan to spray again. The temperatures have gone down steadily. The overnight temperatures are in the 50s. There will be a couple of days of warming and then cooling, so the state right now feels comfortable where they're at. Obviously, if we have sustained temperature increases for a week plus, then they'll consider spraying again. But we're kind of on hold for potentially a second spraying. But that doesn't change the precautions using, and a lot of these precautions come from our communications specialist, Pam Nichols, who's done a great job with this Triple E notification, both through the website and the television and so forth. So thank you to Pam Nichols for all her work that she has done on this. But use, bug spray, DEET, and, long sleeve shirts and pants if you're going to be out at night. Also, sign up for Code Red. We did send out some emergency notifications on the Code Red system. And if you need any help with that, you can go to suttonma.org, and that kind of walks you through that process of how to sign up. LED lighting at Town Hall / Fire Station. Our electrician, Larry Morris, took advantage of a program in which he could purchase free LED lights. And the town would only pay for installation. So Larry took the initiative with my approval and purchased roughly 100 LED lights that were switched out. The electricity went down from 110 watts to 35 watts. These are LED lights. They're pretty attractive. They're not the big, harsh blue lights that they were the first round of LEDs. But it'll save us roughly $3,000 a year. So it was a great investment. It did cost us a little money on the installation, but the turnaround is a quick payback, and it helps our budget, and it helps us with being a green community. The Blackstone River Valley Greenway Challenge, this is an annual event. It actually takes place in a small part of Sutton and down on Lackey Dam and McGuire Road, and really the south east part of the town. They're in town just for just a little glimpse of time. They say an hour and a half, but they come down Uxbridge, they come down McGuire Road, turn on Lackey Dam Road, and they head into Douglas. So it's just that small portion. They've been in touch with our police department. The police department has signed off. Again, this is an annual event. It's been going on for a number of years. And finally, we have a couple new members on the Finance and Warrant Advisory Committee. The new members are Sarah Clemens and Anthony Piltzicker. The two members resigning from that committee are Jeff Kushner and Tom Devine, and we'd like to thank them for their service to the town. Oh, one other item, Mr. Chairman. I am asking the Board of Selectmen to sign this sewer betterment release. It has been paid in full. The Treasurer's Office has affirmed that, and it requires the signature upon the Board of Selectmen to release the lien from their deed. That's all I have for updates, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you very much. Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, wonderful update. Lots of good information. I will come right out and say it. I support your decision with Donna and Aaron. They are both wonderful, and they're going to be the backbone of that department for many years. But I would add, if we could make a motion not to allow Donna ever to retire. Just saying.
Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Yeah.
Well, you said you'd stay until she retires, so.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, so it's a win-win for us. That's for sure.
Good catch. You're speechless.
That's good. That was good. That was really good. I did have an opportunity to meet Darlene. She seemed wonderful, and I think she'll be a good fit. And hopefully she enjoys her time behind the glass. Kudos to Pam. Can we tie Tim into that as well?
Yeah, no, listen, it's a spiral effect.
All
You
right,
gotta-
all right. Kudos to Pam. Everything she does it with her full heart and passion. And I know she spent tremendous amount of time not only researching it, but also going on the lovely Sutton site and, just keeping the community informed. So thank you to Pam. And also like to thank Cheryl.
Yes, sure.
The Code Red message that came through was clear, concise, and on point. So well done. Just shows the professionalism that, of those who work in town hall. Thank you to Larry for getting, how do you purchase free lights?
It's some sort of state program that he found and brought it to my attention. And I was like, yeah, that's perfect. That's a no-brainer. And he provided the labor, and it's just a great situation.
No, it's my kind of green, so
Yeah.
so we're in favor of that. I do have one request, if possible. The next time Larry is in town hall or something, could you have him check out the outlets over on the Common? Because I hate to say it, but Christmas is coming, and I know the Lions decorate the Common, and there have been issues with the outlets, so just add it to the list.
Yep.
As far as the Blackstone River Valley Greenway Challenge, they've come through that little portion of town for many years. It's limited impact, and to my knowledge, and you may say otherwise, I don't think there's ever been any issues.
No.
So I definitely trust that the SPD will put the right plan in place and will handle it appropriately. And thank you to Jeff and Tom for the years that they served on FinCom, and welcome to Sarah and Tony. I'm sure they will do a tremendous job on that board. And that is all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Jim.
Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, thank you so much for your proactive approach here at Town Hall. I think you're on point, and you're giving people an incentive to move forward and move up. And I think Donna and Erin are a great example of that, and I certainly hope to see more of that to come. So
Thank you.
thank you for that foresight. And to welcome Darlene as well. I don't want to repeat everything Jesse has said, but Pam really went above and beyond in her recent efforts, and there was a lot of fear in town about potential consequences of the spraying, and I think that she really kind of brought that anxiety level down in a lot of people. So
good.
my personal thanks to Pam for that. I love free anything, so thank you, Larry. And I would like to just thank Jeffrey and Tom, and welcome Sarah and Anthony, and welcome to town.
Great.
Town board. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jim, for a good report. Again, I'd just like to thank Donna and Erin for stepping in to help out while we were looking for a new treasurer. And I too feel that always having a succession plan and also providing opportunities for people to grow into roles is really important, both in government and in industry. So thank you for that. I'd also like to welcome Darlene to the sewer, in helping us with that, and excited for her to join us. Again, as far as the Triple E goes, just great communication. I really appreciate Pam and Charles' role in keeping people informed. And I just have a question. Do you know if they do decide to resume spraying, will we be notified? Or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will, notify the board as well as the community, so
All right.
stay tuned on that one.
All right. And then saving $3,000 a year is no drop in the bucket, so I'm really happy about the lighting and Larry's initiative to find that program and seek you out and to put that in. And then I'd like to also just thank Jeffrey and Tom for their service on the Finance Committee, and welcome Sarah and Anthony on board. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't repeat everything that everyone said. Just a couple of quick comments on the first one with the treasurer's and collector's role and so forth. I'm just impressed by the smooth transition that we've had from Lisa Trost and Amanda, and to the new people and the new roles. That was as smooth as I could have ever expected that to be. I also agree, Wendy, with Wendy's comments on just the foresight for the succession planning. I think that's important. Welcome to Darlene. The Triple E spraying, nobody really likes the concept of spraying, I guess, but it beats the alternative. So. And also then thanks to Tom Devine and Jeff Kushner for their work over the years. I know they had a lot of good input during my time on the Finance Committee as well, and to welcome Sarah and Anthony. So that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all been covered. So, again, welcome to Lisa and Aaron. And I guess I just want to pick up that same point about the idea of training for succession, to have people in roles where they can step up when the time comes. And that's just a great way to organize. So appreciate that. I said Aaron, I meant Darlene.
Yeah.
The Triple E, I guess I would like to reiterate that was state mandated spraying. We really had no say over whether that got done or didn't get done. Although, I guess I'm in Jeff's camp. Although I was certainly concerned about the idea of spraying, I think the risks clearly outweighed, at least in my mind, the concerns that I had. And I'm glad you picked up on the Code Red thing. I think that was going to be my comment as well, to remind people that haven't done it to go to the website and sign up for Code Red, because it really is can be valuable when things like this come up, and we want to be able to reach people. It's a great tool for that. Thanks to Larry Morris. Somehow we don't say Larry's name very much in these meetings, and we should. So
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah, he's really an unsung hero here at Town Hall. He charges us very little.
Yeah.
And when he does eventually retire, hopefully
A long time
a
away.
long time from now, if we can make another motion to prevent Larry
I
Morris.
second that.
So he does provide a great benefit.
And again, thanks to Jeff and Tom for their long service on the Finance Committee. Welcome to Sarah and Anthony. We do it when we have appointments, and since these guys don't come before us, we should just take the opportunity, I think, to thank them and everybody that serves the town in those volunteer capacities. It can be a lot of work, but it's really valuable work to the town. So we appreciate people doing that. So thanks for the update, Jim. I think we can go right to announcements, roundtable, and business topics.
Usual, I have a bunch, but not as much as in weeks before. I am just going to be very brief first on the Labor Day breakfast. We'll let you talk about that. I'd just like to thank the First Congregational Church. Superb. I would like to highlight the Historical Society's work that they did in the cemetery behind Town Hall. They were before us at the last meeting. They gave us a very informed presentation, and I had a chance to pop over for a couple of hours last week or the week before, and they were setting stones and cleaning stones, and it was just fantastic. About 20 residents showed up, so it wasn't really all hands on deck, but everyone there seemed to enjoy themselves. And on that note, I talked to Brian, and he mentioned to me that they will be back at it on the 14th, September 14th, which is a Saturday, with a rain day of the 15th. I would suggest anyone interested in participating, check out the Historical Society on Facebook. On Saturday, 9/3, this coming Saturday, from 12 to 3, there's going to be a walking tour up at Waters Farm. Now, I'm going to mention this for one reason. This event was published in the Blackstone River Valley National Heritage Corridor magazine. So I know many of us appreciate the value of Waters Farm, but hopefully the fact that they've been included in this magazine will bring outsiders to our town and to see just what a wonderful, wonderful entity Waters Farm is, and of course help them out as they go forward. I'd like to thank St. Mark's and their continual generosity in terms of their support of the food pantry. I have 14 buckets. All 14 buckets were filled, and yeah, I'm sure they were very happy. Although I do not have a food pantry list tonight due to the fact that Monday was Labor Day. Generally, on Mondays, the seniors go in and put the stuff away, and I didn't want to reach out to Michelle in the case that those who volunteer for that were not present, so That is all I have for this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on your point of breakfast at the Congregational Church, it was such a joy that the weather cooperated this year. That doesn't always happen. It's kind of like Waters Farms days. But it was great. It was just so wonderful. It just really harkens back to what a community we live in, that there's such a great turnout, that Dan was providing some great folk tunes, and people really sort of just came together as a community. And it was interesting to see people table hopping, and it was really, really nice. And I thought it was, a good value, and glad to see the church was able to make some money. So that's all I have for this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, I too would like to thank the Congregational Church and their continuing role to kind of bring us together as a town with events like this, like the Strawberry Festival and the Labor Day breakfast. And I remember when I was a kid going to the Labor Day breakfast and down in Purgatory, and just the continuation of this as a tradition and bringing the town together. I think it's they just do an incredible job at being that center point and kind of taking on their role of being on the common and utilizing that space. So, but that's all I have.
Great. Thank you.
And
Jeff?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, being the last in line here, pretty much everything's been said. So I think I'll wrap it up for tonight. Thanks.
You're welcome. I got a couple of things real quick. First of all, our next meeting, I think actually Wendy and I both are going to be missing, so as long as we have a quorum, guys will be good. Jonathan and I actually went to Jen's presentation on, was that Thursday night?
Thursday night.
And I know we've already talked about it, but there's a lot that goes into these things, and I just wanted to thank her again for the work that she does to put this on. There's demand for it, demand for the presentations at various places around town. So this is not a one-show trick. She's going to have to appear all over the place, I think, to do this. So it takes a lot of her time, and it's a lot of effort to put together. So I just don't want to let that go. And then I'd like to talk about something kind of under the kind of an old business topic. So we have talked about the sewer issues coming through the center of town and up to school. But I think we're at a point where we as a board need to decide if we're ready to push this forward at fall town meeting. So we've come a long way. And Jim, maybe if you can give us a final update of kind of what's left to do. I think you said the well test or something is like the only thing left to really.
That was a big issue. It still is an issue, is whether we have enough water to essentially replace the gray water system, the wastewater treatment plant. To that end, Don, and as I, that came up at the last meeting, and I put Don on it, and he's contracted with McClure to dig a test well to verify and certify that there's enough water. I think it's roughly 6,000 gallons per day. And McClure has agreed to do that work. So that work, Don has told him needs to get done ASAP. So I'm hoping that work is done by September 17th when we present the draft warrant.
Yep.
If not, then, the board doesn't sign the final warrant until October, 3rd or 2nd, that first meeting in October. So it's the first. So that's my initial, I think all the other questions regarding this have been answered, at least from a logistics of our plan to bring it down to schools. Hopefully this test well proves positive, and then all the questions I think have been answered as far as viability.
For us as a board, just to summarize, this project, as we know, has gone through a lot of changes in a relatively short period of time. We know what happened at the first meeting that was here, and then it went from a two-phase project really to the concept that it really should be a one-phase project. There's been a lot of engineering study done to answer questions about the viability of the project as a whole, and as Jim just outlined, there's really only one significant question left in that regard. But that, you know, A, do we as a board support it? B, do we support the timing now versus some future, you know, maybe the spring? So, you know, are we comfortable that we have communicated with the town well enough, that the process is sort of mature enough to bring to the town? And so I think, you know, from Jim's perspective, for us to give him some guidance about where we would like to go would be useful. So I thought we might want to talk about that.
Sure, thank you. We've spoken on this already. I have no problem personally going forward and putting it on the warrant for town meeting. My only concern is the communication piece that you alluded to. I understand that we do, I think, a tremendous job in getting the word out, but where it was presented to us early on and then it kind of went away and then it came back, I'm not really gonna say last minute per se, but you know, last week or our last meeting for the most part, my fear is that it's too short. And ultimately, while I don't think that would stop town meeting contemplating it and potentially moving forward with it, my fear is that there'll be a backlash of sorts saying that, oh, we're trying to ram it through. So I would caution, and my suggestion would be almost, I mean, I know we still have time, but see what we can do about getting the word out a little more, because this is crucial. And my fear is that backlash passes at town meeting, but fails at the ballot out of the backlash. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
I think just briefly, the fact that it's actually come before the board twice has promoted some information and knowledge about the project. I'm not opposed, obviously, to getting more information out there. Obviously, the more the better, and I would hate to see it fail at ballot. But that being said, that water treatment plant at the school is at the end of its life. And I honestly don't know if we can wait until Springtown meeting. So I'm comfortable with putting it on the ballot, but again, just trying to promote some townwide information as much as possible.
Jonathan?
I think this is one that I'm a little torn about. I think Jesse has a lot of good points. I think initially when I discussed with Jim, we were kind of hashing about, you know, like I was comfortable with the spring. You know, I do think that there's going to be a significant concern with the potential impact to the Sutton Center. I think we need to get some information for people and to consider other options too for us to, you know, mitigate some of those concerns from a development pressure perspective. So I'm kind of leaning more towards a spring, you know, getting it on the warrant in the spring, just to kind of hash out those kind of concerns, because I think there's a significant group of people who are concerned about sewer coming through Sutton Center, and I think at the end of the day, I think we've made significant progress, and the fact that we are looking at this as a school issue and solving that challenge, but that's just kind of where I'm at right now. But I could see it from a different light and move towards this fall, but right now that's kind of where I'm standing, is in the spring.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think the project, I'm not a septic expert by any means, but everything I heard sounds like the questions have been answered.
Yeah, for the most part.
For the most part. And Jesse, I agree with you in some ways, but not in one others, as far as the communication. I think, I don't know that we're great at communicating to the public everything that we know. I think there's a lot of misinformation that, not coming from us, but that just gets out there. And I think it's important that we communicate clearly what this project is, why it's potentially beneficial for the town. I think we need to know, and I appreciate, Jim, that you told us what it's gonna cost on an average. I have some questions on that, and whether that factors in other debt that we might have, and how it's all gonna impact everyone's taxes. 'Cause I think that's a big issue, and that's, if it's gonna fail, it's gonna fail because of that. So I'm in favor of moving forward with it sooner than later. I agree with Wendy that we have potential issues down at the school that can't wait. So if we can communicate and summarize the project, the benefits to the community, and the costs, I'm okay with going forward with it.
Yeah, you know, all in all, I think that's almost exactly where I am. I look at this really as a financial issue. So although I absolutely agree with you, if it's going to fail, it's going to fail over the tax issue. Although from my perspective, I think that it's the finances that actually make this the project that we want to do. So you know, the cost of having to you know, either fix or completely replace the system that's at the school, the cost here at Town Hall, and the annual operating costs of the system at the school today, to me, make this project really, I don't want to say a no-brainer, but really the way to go. From a financial standpoint, really that's the thing to do. This makes a lot of sense from that perspective. And when I was thinking about the communication issue, my question for us was, well, what do we do to communicate? Really, the only thing that we do is have these meetings. And so, you know, it always surprises me the number of people that actually watch these meetings. There are people that pay attention to what's going on, and those are the people that ultimately are going to vote, I think. So unless we have some kind of clear plan on how it is we're going to do some further marketing, then the communication issue for me doesn't seem all that compelling, because we just don't do a lot of marketing. You know, that this is how we talk to people. So I was left with the idea that we've kind of brought everything together that we need to. I think the Jeff, you said it some time ago, and I was struggling with the same thing when it was conceived as a two-part plan. It was really hard to know how to go to the town and talk about that, because bringing it to the center of town just didn't really seem all that exciting. Now that it's a one-part plan, a complete plan, and that the financial elements become, you know, immediately available to the town, and that all the residents along the way are going to be able to connect, I think it's ready. So I guess my feeling is I feel like we ought to move forward. I'm ready to move forward.
So in the meantime, obviously, I've got some work to do with the test well, and we got to get that information first.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll work on that, and I'll work with Dawn and Pam Nichols and try to. I think the one thing that we talked about as far as communication is getting a one-page cheat sheet that essentially summarizes why we're doing this, what the importance to the town is, and the financial goals, et cetera. And we'll be working on that. And I will hopefully get an answer from McClure by the next meeting. So,
yeah. So my comments were all sort of dependent upon the outcome of that, but
right.
But assuming that works the right way.
I think I still, from my perspective, I still have a couple questions that are still mulling about. So one of the concerns that I'd maybe it's already been addressed, but a lot of, from what I understand, you need a certain flow in order to make the system work. Of new houses and whatnot connected to it, so it can flow through the system. The question I have is that I'm not yet convinced that we're going to get that many houses to hook into it.
I don't think that matters.
No, but one of the questions I have is the school is not open really during the summer, so you don't have that much flow. So what does that do when the school is closed? You know, what kind of impact could that potentially have? And I'm sure the engineers have solved for that, but I just.
Yeah, I think they did, I think they did. They essentially said that this system is not reliant upon flow. It's not like Gilmore Drive, where, it comes to the bottom of the hill and bottom of Gilmore Drive before it goes up to the sewer treatment plant. And it lies down there until, at some point it could become, I don't know what they call it, like septic.
Yeah.
Which is bad waste, and when it gets to the treatment plant, it needs to be almost passed through because it's so negative to the system. But the way this system's been designed, it doesn't rely upon any one big user pumping into the system on a constant basis, and a lot of that has to do with the force mains and the pump station, et cetera. I think so. That's just my thoughts on that.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I had that same question because I recall when we built the new one down in Manchog, that was a big issue at the beginning with enough flow to sort of make the whole system work. But I think that was the answer that they gave the other day, that really the water replacement system at the school was the only thing that really needed to be dealt with, and the rest of it is mostly gravity fed anyway. So.
That was one of the things I just thought of. I was like, wait a minute, school isn't open all year round, and I was just thinking about that flow issue, and so I think,
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why they added after they met with us the first time, that additional pump station up near Cole. Is that near Cole?
Well, they've got the one pump station at Boston Road, I think 252 or some number like that. And then they're going to convert the treatment plant down at the schools into a pump station as well.
Right.
So.
Jim,
All right.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick, the cost I think that you gave was something like after the second year, like $84 per average household.
Yeah, so approximately 400,000. The average household has actually gone up. You were talking about affordable housing. So yeah, that has.
So that's what it is. Average 400,000 being the average household.
Yes, 400,000 is the average. Just shy of that, it's like 393.
So is that the cost for just this project? Because I remember when we
Yes,
talked about
this
that
is-
roadway,
this
it
is
was like
without
$75. That
any-
was only $2 million.
This is without any other. I don't know what the Latin term is, sine qua non, or no other impact. It's just standing alone. This
That's
is
the debt service on what?
this project, not incorporated with all the other debt service. The police station is starting to roll off, and the school department, the school, middle school, high school, continues to roll off. We borrowed full for that in 2011 or 12, and that's been rolling off for the last number of years. So, yeah, the $84 would have an impact. I don't know what kind of impact relative to our total debt status as a town, but not a tremendous impact.
Do you know how long we're funding it over?
20 years.
Okay.
That's what our scenario is, 20 years.
Okay.
Maybe that's the answer to your question.
Yeah,
Maybe
it was
the other
just
a good
because
funding
I
period.
know when we talked about that roadway stabilization, we had a $2 million borrowing and it was gonna cost like $75. And I'm trying to correlate that to a
That would-
4.8 to.
That would have been a short-term borrowing.
Must have
Right, I just
That would
didn't
have
know
been a
what
6 or
the
7
length-
year.
Yeah,
Well, the roadway stabilization fund, the way we conceived it, was a permanent override. This is a debt exclusion override. So the
no, I
road,
understand that, but
Okay.
I think when we were back then, I think we were talking about the impact to fund the $2 million initial borrowing was gonna be like $75, but I assume that it has to be just the term of the debt that we're.
Well, that would have only gone up for a total collection of 300,000. That was the initial plan.
that's a 1-year borrowing for $300,000.
Right, and we would have used that to go for a $2 million borrowing or
No,
something.
so that's what I'm saying, so the debt service is, on a $2 million borrowing was gonna be $300,000, which was gonna be $75 per household.
Something like that, yeah.
So if
Well-
this is gonna be $84 on a 4.8 million, it just. I just
It's sort of comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah, it has to be the term, the length of it.
The roadway stabilization fund was always about borrowing $300,000. That's it. You can capitalize that in year one to borrow $2 million based upon that $300,000 recurring revenue. So you're gonna get 300, and the next year you're gonna get 300, and then that's enough to provide the debt service on the $2 million borrowing. And then, in a couple years down the line, then you can borrow an additional $1 million. Then a couple years down, so it's just really.
But so I guess my concern, we're comfortable that it's that 84, 85, whatever that number is. That's a good number that we can kind of.
Listen, I'm confident that Nick Nunemacher ran those numbers based upon a 4.5% rate over 20 years. Average household value he runs through just the assessor's information. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that number.
Okay.
So I'll present that at the next meeting and the draft warrant and for the board's consideration. It's not a approval, you're not signing the warrant at the next meeting. And hopefully we get that information together by that point in time.
And it's important to get that draft warrant on that date to trigger other dates after that, is that right?
I'm sorry.
So, well, there's gonna be 2 members missing on the 17th.
Right.
But I think you need to have the draft warrant in front of us by a certain date, because there are other dates that are important after that,
Well,
right?
the whole idea of the draft warrant is something that we came up with, was that, just to hit you with, here's the warrant, you gotta sign it tonight, or, it's not gonna go. It just was too rushed, so we decided to go with this draft warrant. Just, what are your thoughts? These are the items we're looking at. Any other thoughts? Just to get everybody's, feelings out. The following night, is that the 18th, I think, is a finance committee meeting, and we will present the draft warrant at that time as well to them. Again, they're not agreeing on anything, they're just reviewing it, and, the majority of the warrant.
Sign the warrant the next meeting, right?
Right.
Yeah, in October. And the majority of the warrant are planning board items. A lot of them around the housing that we just discussed, cottage housing, and, the over 55, under age 18 allowed, and over 55, and we get credit for that in the housing, affordable housing plan.
Okay. We'll just have to do our homework offline.
I'm on it.
Excellent. Okay, anything else? Thank you for that, I appreciate it, everybody. So I think we can have a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Not very much hesitation there. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.